Hey, everybody. We will get started in just 1 minute. So if you haven't had a chance to do so already, many of you have, thanks for that, but you could say hello, tell us where you're from, and as we're prompting, perhaps start thinking about questions that you have for us on this topic. You could even post those questions now if you'd like in the comments section. We'll be collecting those. Hello, Holly Jensen from Seattle, Washington. I know you. I know quite a few people that I've seen so far. Nice to see some of you here. So Jamie, I've told the folks that I'm coming to them from just outside Boston. Do you want to tell us where you're coming from?
I am broadcasting from Monterrey, Mexico, where I'm here for our conference.
That's right. We are broadcasters, aren't we?
Yes.
That sounds quite fancy.
It may be an overstatement, but I'm in Monterrey.
I mean, I guess in a way, that's kind of what's happening. We'll give it just a few more seconds. We'll ship 1 minute late to account for our friends getting loaded into this platform. For some, not the easiest platform to get on. Western Michigan representing. That's nice.
There's Jill.
Yeah, Western Michigan. I think you know some folks in Western Michigan, Jamie.
Yes, we do.
I think perhaps you know the folk that's in this webinar and has said hello from Western Michigan. In any case, let us get started here. I'm going to be sharing my screen. That'll take me just a moment to get loaded up. And let's see, I'm going to go into full screen mode. Jamie, could you verbally confirm that we are in full screen mode?
Yes, we are. I see you. I see the slides.
Perfect. All right, let's get started. Hello again, everyone. Good afternoon if you're somewhere in the world close to me. Good morning if you're if you're joining us from a place like Seattle, Washington, and perhaps good evening if you're joining us from a place like Wrocław, Poland. I saw you there, Thomas. Anyway, we're thrilled to have you here. You can welcome to another monthly webinar from the Lean Enterprise Institute. We are honored by your attendance. My name is Josh Howell. I currently serve as the president of this here institution. I'm excited this month to be joined by Jamie Bonini. He's the president of the Toyota Production System Support Center, otherwise known as TSSC, part of Toyota Motors North America. TSSC and LEI have long been connected, many years of collaboration. Jamie will introduce himself in just a minute. But our topic for this month is the role of the team leader in TPS at Toyota. Due to my lean origin story, if you will, something I've written about in the past, which took place in 2007 when I was struggling to run a coffee shop for Starbucks, struggling mightily. Some of you in this webinar can perhaps attest to the struggles that I was having. And I was looking for Starbucks, as I mentioned. That was one of the vast majority of companies that does not have a team leader role, at least not one in the way that we're going to talk about it today. And so all of that makes this topic, and in particular, the team leader role that we can see at Toyota, near and dear to my heart. And I guess I'm going to kick things off by just sharing a little bit about that experience. Perhaps this is an experience that you'll find relatable. I would not be surprised if many of you will. Some of you quite literally will find relatable running coffee shops. And this is a story of essentially my first encounter with lean thinking in practice. At the time, I was managing a coffee shop, as I mentioned, in Portland, Oregon. I was struggling to do so. Struggling, I guess I can say after the fact. At the time, I felt like I was quite successful. And this particular story starts when, on a fateful day, I received one of those emails from corporate that said a couple of people from corporate were going to come to my store to visit. There was nothing for me to be concerned about. I should just go about my day as usual. If you've received such an email, you know that, of course, You're not going to go about your day as usual. You're going to do all you can to put your best foot forward, to show off for your corporate visitors. So they came to visit my store, and the pre-framing was that they simply wanted to see how a coffee shop runs. I would later come to find out that they were representing some new ideas that the company had begun experimenting with. Those ideas were based in lean. And so they just wanted to kind of get a sense of the current state of operations in a Starbucks coffee store. Again, I was told to just kind of run the shift like I would normally run it. But of course, I tried to do my best to impress them with my amazing skills as a store manager, as a supervisor for that particular shift. And so I took on a role at that company, a role that I see in many organizations. At Starbucks at that time anyway, the role was called the floater. So I was out there on the floor serving coffee to customers. There were 3 or 4 other baristas at the time. I was in the role of floater, which is to say that I floated between all the different workstations, kind of plugged all the leaky holes in our little ship there, and kind of kept everything running as smoothly as possible. Given the onslaught of customers coming into our store, this was during a morning rush. So you can imagine, there were many customers eager to get their morning pick-me-up. Some had quite complicated orders that were going to frustrate us as the baristas, trying to prepare their food, prepare their beverages. But in any case, the observers arrived, they sat in the cafe, and they simply observed. And I understood that the assignment was to show them how impressive store operations could be. And I was thinking, of course, kind of selfishly, it was an opportunity to show them how impressive I could be in that floater role as the store's manager. And so as you can imagine, if you've been into a coffee shop, the business really picked up. There was a long line of customers trying to both place orders and receive their finished orders. There was a queue of cups stacking up at the espresso machine. And in that floater capacity, oftentimes I was doing 3, 4, 5, 10 things at once, trying to take care of all the customers, trying to support all of the baristas that I was working with. And by God, did I not think that I was impressing these corporate visitors with my heroics, you could say. Now, of course, as I later learned more about lean and got to talk to these visitors about what they were interested in and kind of what they were beginning to think about for store operations, I came to understand that the heroics that I was demonstrating on that fateful morning were simply covering up from a poorly designed, poorly running operating system, one where we weren't actively monitoring for problems, we weren't capably engaged in problem solving. We were simply doing our best, often going beyond human capacity to keep the store running, to try and keep our customers happy, to keep the coffee flowing, so on and so forth. I share that story because, as I mentioned, I think that's probably a pretty relatable experience for many of you. If you've had that kind of a role, sort of a frontline supervisory role, I wouldn't be surprised if a story like that is relatable to you. And as we're going to see as we dive into this webinar today, a role carried out like that, like it was at Starbucks in 2007, like it is in many organizations today here in 2025, is sort of the antithesis of what we see in the team leader role at Toyota today. What we could have seen in the team leader role at Toyota for many decades, in fact. We'll get into that a little bit with Jamie. So anyway, I wanted to kick things off with that story as a point of reference for our conversation today that we will get into here shortly. But the next thing that I want to introduce you to, so over the last several years, Jamie and I and many others have been part of an emerging initiative known as the Future of People at Work. It's a collaboration started by 7 nonprofit organizations. They're shown on the bottom of this slide. And it's grown to include many other organizations, many other individuals, all of whom are dedicated to the practice and promotion of continuous improvement. One output of that initiative, of that collaboration, is what you're seeing on the screen, a sort of universal definition of lean that members and associates of the nonprofits including some well-known figures such as Jeffrey Liker, collaboratively developed. You can see that definition here. So lean, as it shows on the slide, is simply everyone learning to create value and flow easier, better, sooner, cheaper, for everyone's benefit. By everyone there, I'm referring to the workers, I'm referring to managers, I'm referring to the executives, I'm referring to the shareholders, the owners, and of course, I'm referring to the customers. Everyone should benefit in a lean system. That's what we're trying to capture, sort of in the essence of this definition. Now, while that group, and perhaps many of you attending this webinar today, could agree on this simple universal definition, the fact is that each of us, individually, organizationally, has our own definition of lean or an associated set of ideas. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jamie now, after he says hello, introduces himself, tells you a little bit about his background. Jamie's going to tell you about his and Toyota's definition of the associated ideas known as TPS. So with that, Jamie, I'll hand things over to you.
Thank you, Josh, and welcome everybody from around the world, it looks like. My name's Jamie Bonini, and I'm the president of a nonprofit group at Toyota, as Josh mentioned, called the Toyota Production System Support Center. And we have, for over 30 years, worked outside Toyota and helped all kinds of organizations, companies, and a lot of nonprofits build a Toyota-like culture. And so we work outside in non-automotive environments. We're in the world of translating what Toyota has learned over many, many years, engineering, designing, and building cars and trucks, to non-automotive world, not automotive environments. And we do that on site, and we do training and seminars and things like that. Here's our definition when we design the Toyota production system, which I think is very consistent with the broader definition that Josh introduced that we've all agreed to. But there are some particular points of emphasis I want to highlight for the Toyota system that actually relates very much to this team leader role. So here's our definition. The Toyota production system is an organizational culture of highly engaged people that are solving problems or innovating to drive performance. And this culture is created by a three-part system of a philosophy that underlies some technical tools and practices that I'll elaborate on in a minute, and must be supported by a managerial role, which is to engage and develop people. So that is our definition. But the heart of this is highly engaged, passionate people. And what are they engaged and passionate about? Solving problems and innovating in a way that connects to performance. Okay, so this is the technical piece of the system that I mentioned was a third of the system. I'm going to explain this briefly because it's going to set up the team role. Many of you may have seen this TPS house. We've used this depiction for a long time. I'll just describe it briefly. At the roof of that house are the results that we aspire to. We don't even put safety on there because we take that for granted that that is a first and foremost priority. But after safety, we want to have a very high quality good or service at very low cost, all the elements that go into cost, and at very short lead time or speed, order to delivery. And in order to deliver safety, quality, cost, and speed, there are two main pillars or principles of the Toyota production system. And shown on the left is just in time, which we want our good or service to flow continuously at the takt time, which is the rate of customer demand. And that flow allows short lead time, but it also exposes disruptions to flow as problems to solve. So that's the just-in-time piece. And then on the right is built-in quality. The Japanese term for that is jidoka. It doesn't translate very well to English, but an everyday example would be if you get in your passenger car, you're the driver, a passenger gets in, they go to put on their seatbelt. The seatbelt doesn't connect fully, and you drive forward. And when that happens, you get a bing, 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 bing. That is a signal of a problem to solve. That is jidoka. Lots of signals coming out to signal problems. So for the Toyota production system, we try to run the operation with a high level of continuous flow, and disruptions to the flow are problems as part of the just-in-time. And with the high level of Jidoka, where you have signals and alarms and bing, bing, bings, lights, music, other things that signal abnormalities or problems. And as we're running the operation by design, intentionally, lots of problems come to the surface. And we couple that with an organizational structure and people that are very passionate and engaged to solve those problems, so many of them don't reoccur. And by massive amounts of reoccurrence prevention, we get better and better performance, and done properly, we get engaged people that are excited to solve more and more problems. So that's the essence of the system: expose lots of problems through the just-in-time and Jidoka. I'll make one added comment, not too much elaborate on today, but the foundation of that house has a foundation of stability. We can't have a high level of flow and a high level of built-in quality in Jidoka if we don't have stability for the people, the materials, the work methods, procedures, and the machinery. So that has to be stable first. After that, we can have this system running that exposes lots of problems as they arrive. And in the middle there, we have standardized work, which is how we actually design frontline work to pace that work to the tact time. We'll talk about that in a minute. So we're going to expose lots of problems in the Toyota production system. Josh, maybe you can go to the next slide. Okay, so here's an example of how this might manifest itself on this cartoon description of an assembly line. On the left, you have a vehicle being assembled in a 60-second pitch, or the tact time. In this simple example, that car is going to flow through that station, and the team member at the rear of the car has 60 seconds worth of work to perform. That work over the 60 seconds is described by the elements of the standardized work on the right, basically showing the routine of work that person would go through. So steps 1 through 6, that work would need to be specified in terms of the sequence and the location where they do the work, and it should be tied precisely to the tact time. Ideally, they have 60 seconds of work, and the tact time, in this case, is the speed of the line, exactly matches to that. So that team member is doing their work at this 60-minute regular, 60-second regular routine. Now, as they are doing the work, there will be some problems. A part will not fix. They'll notice a scratch on the vehicle. Something won't sound right. And then they pull that cord that team member is showing. That cord is an andon cord, signals music and a light, shown a number 3 there on that andon board. And when that happens, within seconds, that team leader over there on the left arrives. And when the team leader arrives within seconds, being called by this Jidoka signal, they first investigate, well, what is the problem? And they will get a description, and then they will go to try to contain the problem so the line doesn't stop within the 60 seconds, do something temporarily to contain it. And then they will go to work on root cause analysis to try to prevent that problem from happening again. And there's a high likelihood that problem may have occurred very recently, right before that signal. So a lot of the evidence of the problem will be fresh. Solved, and that team leader is working right in that location to be able to help attack that problem. So this team leader is providing on-demand, immediate, urgent problem solving as they are being called by this, in this example, by the andon system to come to solve a problem. You want to go on to the next slide?
Yeah, so I'll jump in here, Jamie. So thanks for that kind of introduction to both TPS, the technical side, the TPS house that many of us are familiar with, and then a bit of initial explanation on the team leader role. We'll dive a little bit deeper into that in just a moment. But I guess in the vein of kind of plumbing the depths of the basic thinking here, if you out in the, those of you joining us today are following the Lean Enterprise Institute, LEI, on a somewhat regular basis, chances are you're familiar with the LTF. For those that are or aren't, the LTF is essentially our best offering for folks seeking guidance for their lean transformation efforts. In our view, because context matters and each situation is unique, we simply don't believe in a one-size-fits-all roadmap for any and all lean transformations. Instead, we believe in a set of fundamental questions about purpose, product, process, and people that must be continually addressed for lean transformations to be effective. And we believe in certain guiding principles for answering the questions consistent with lean thinking and practice. Those questions are, I'm going to kind of go around the house here. First, what's our value-driven purpose? Or more specifically, more concretely, more actionably, what problem are we trying to solve? With clarity on that, we can ask ourselves about the work to be done and how that work will be improved in order to solve the problem to help us fulfill our purpose. With clarity on the work and how that work will be improved, we can then dig into the capabilities we'll need to both do the work and improve the work or solve its problems. All the while, in order to fulfill our purpose and solve the problem we're here to solve. Then kind of governing both the capability development pillar and the work improvement pillar, we think about a management system. Here we're talking about a critical role in the management system at Toyota, the team leader role. And inside that management system, we're thinking not just in terms of mechanisms of the management system that build capabilities and facilitate continuous improvement, but we're also thinking about the behaviors that leaders exhibit who are functioning within that management system. And then underneath all of it, we're thinking about sort of the culture, the mindset, the basic thinking that undergirds all of the other aspects of our effort. And so I thought this would be kind of a fun opportunity to demonstrate use of the LTF. We think of the LTF as simply a set of questions that help us practice lean thinking. And in the image that we just presented, that Jamie explained, we can apply the LTF for the sake of kind of practicing its use. So in terms of purpose, what's the purpose that we see illustrated in this graphic? Well, you could say it's to build a car profitably to enable customer mobility. That's kind of the higher level purpose. Now, specifically, there are problems to solve that each and every worker involved in that effort might encounter. Problems having to do with safety, with quality, with timing. In this case, we don't know specifically what problem that team member is encountering, but we can see clearly they are encountering a problem. Okay, so with the second question of the LTF, what's the work and how will it be improved? From the team member perspective, we can recognize that they're expected to use the available parts, the methods, the tools in order to, let's say, attach a bumper. And as Jamie explained, they're going to be following their standardized work. And they need to follow that standardized work and complete that standardized work within the allotted 60 seconds. Those 60 seconds determined by the rate of customer demand or takt time. Now, also, still thinking from the team member perspective, if they encounter a problem, their work is to pull the end on and call for help. That's an expectation for the team member role. Now, thinking from the team leader perspective, their work is different. Their work is to be available and to respond to that and-on quickly, as Jamie explained, within the cycle of work, in this case, 60 seconds, to address the problem. Okay, so that's the work both from the team member's perspective and the team leader's perspective. Now we can get into what capabilities are required to do all of that. Again, from the team member perspective, there's this knowledge and the skill to do, to train, to coach the standardized work in the and-on system. There's the knowledge and skill for troubleshooting problems that might occur. We think of those as type 1 problem solving or type 1 problems, or to conduct root cause problem solving when there's sort of recurring issues. We think of those as type 2. So that might be how we answer the question around capability. Continuing around the framework with regard to our management systems, what's the management system? What are the leader behaviors? Well, in management system terms, we can recognize in this illustration that there are mechanisms to easily recognize abnormalities or delays. Jamie explained that as rooted in the TBS house. There's the and-on system to call for help. That's an element of the management system. There's team leaders with capability and capacity to respond within the cycle of work. So they're nearby, they're available when the need arises. And they're capable to address problems and kind of send problems along defined pathways where they might be addressed effectively. For leader behaviors, we would expect to see here a sense of urgency, empathy, an ability to collaborate, discipline, to always be available, always be responsive when issues arise. And then underneath all of that, the basic thinking, a few that kind of come to mind for me. One would be Well, first, problems are everywhere all the time. Just sort of expect that you're constantly running into issues, and be set up for when those occur to take advantage of the learning opportunity and to get those addressed quickly and effectively. Another kind of aspect of basic thinking, we might say, is the idea to go hard on the process, go easy on the people. After all, team members want to do a good job. And then maybe a final thing that we can recognize in this picture, I don't know, it's sort of alluded to in this picture, implied in this picture, is that capability for doing work and improving work or solving its problems is best developed on the job. Anyway, so a quick illustration of how we might use the LTF to practice lean thinking as applied to this illustration and the subject of our webinar today, the team leader role. Jamie, I will hand things back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Josh. And I want to mention to the folks in the comments in the chat, I've been reading through it. We're going to go through about 2 more slides, and then we're going to open it up for questions. So if, as we go through this, you have a question about what we've gone through so far, and there are a few in there, please add those to the chat, and we'll prioritize those and talk about them in just a couple minutes. Okay, so that team leader that we just described has 4 main roles at a high level. The first one is to maintain output. In that example, it's to make sure that as much as possible that we can finish that car within the 60 seconds that's allotted, so the assembly line does not stop. And that is in terms of getting the volume, the quality, and comply with customer first principles. It also includes backfilling and assisting a team member on the line when needed. So there may be an example where there is a bolt that doesn't thread in properly. Team member calls, team leader comes. The team leader has to actually do some quick repair within 60 seconds. The team leader will do that while the team member will finish the rest of their standard work. So they may have 2 people working on the vehicle at the same time with the goal of maintaining output and quality within that 60-second takt time as much as possible. So they're there to, number one, assure we get the output and the quality and assist as needed. The second thing that they do is the standardized work that we talked about there, which is the 60 seconds of work that the team member is doing. The team leader is coaching the team member on that, confirming by some regular reviews and observation, writing that standardized work document, and they will also make that standardized work better. So if that person is doing the work in 60 seconds and there's something that can be improved to make something easier, shorter, less reaching, less walking, ergonomically better, or prevent some problems, they will rewrite the standardized work and get agreement on 2 shifts and make a better version of that standardized work. And they're also auditing it and confirming it and reviewing it. So we're constantly doing the work to the standardized work and looking in a smooth, rhythmic manner. The third role of the team leader that is right there in that area is to train team members, especially new team members needing fundamental skills. So if we have a new team member coming on the job, they've done some fundamental skill training offline, they're getting up to speed, they're going through a learning curve, they will be training new team members on that. So you have real-time training right in the area that's very practical to the 60 seconds of work that needs to be done in the example that we've been talking about. And finally, they solve problems in the work to prevent reoccurrence. And they'll do that every day. So as we're running that line, there are and-on pulls. Many of them get resolved within the 60 seconds, but they will do some reoccurrence prevention. An example might be a scratch or a mark on a vehicle. The team member may come take care of that, but then they're going to have to go upstream and figure out, well, where did that scratch or blemish come from, so that we can find the root cause of that while it's fresh and put in some measures to preventing that from happening again. So they will do lots of reoccurrence prevention. I just gave an example of a quality problem in the vehicle. There may be a parts supply problem. There could be all kinds of different problems that would come in place, but they're looking at what can I do to make a change in how work is done or how things are laid out to prevent a similar problem from happening again. So this is the 4 main roles of the team leader that is right there accompanying the team member. Next slide. Okay, and here's how this typically works. Typically, for every team member that is doing the standard work that we described in that example, for every 4 of them, roughly 4, sometimes 5, maybe 6 occasionally, but mostly 4 to 5, there will be that offline team member that is very familiar with the work and working in that area. So this is a 4 to 5 to 1 ratio. And in order to determine what that ratio is, I mentioned that I live in the world of translating the Toyota production system outside Toyota and non-Toyota environments where they're not making cars. We build this team leader role quite regularly, and we come up with 4 key criteria to figure out what should that ratio be because they're not making cars. It's different than our environment. So one thing that we look at is the layout and geography. That's related to how easily and how quick can the team leader arrive if there is a problem signaled. 2, what is the number, frequency, and complexity of problems? If there are a lot of problems that are occurring, for example, doing a new model launch or a new technology launch or in a startup operation, you're going to need a smaller ratio because you're going to need smaller problem-solving capacity. If the problems are more complex, that will affect the ratio. The third is the skill of the team member. If you have a very highly skilled team member that has a lot of experience and very well performing the work, there probably will be fewer problems that arise related to the team member's skill and training. And lastly, the skill of the team leader. A really experienced, stronger team leader can handle a broader span because they have more skills, more familiarity with the process. So we use these 4 factors as guideline to determining what that ratio should be. But a ballpark ratio is 4 to 6 to 1 is pretty typical. If you get too much larger than that, then the team leader cannot actually do that reoccurrence prevention problem solving role. They can't own and write and update all the standardized work. They can't properly perform the 4 roles that I described before. Next slide. I think we have time for, yes, comments and questions.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so I can see everybody. Great. Thanks for all the questions that have come in already. Please keep them coming. We're going to pause now for some Q&A. We've got another block of time later reserved for some Q&A as well. So we'll kind of be flexible here, but we really want to engage in your questions. Now, several of your questions, I hope, were addressed already. So thank you for those questions. And I guess you were confirming that our plan had some quality built into it. So thank you for that. For example, one question that came in was around how many people a team leader manages, which, Jamie, you were just answering with that slide right there. But here's a question that you and I talked about in preparation that perhaps you could elaborate on. The question is, could you explain the difference between the supervisor role and a team leader role?
So in my example, the way this would work is for every 4 or 5 team members that are building the product, there will be one offline team leader. That team leader is almost always a former team member that was promoted and applied for this team leader role. The team leader must be able to do all of the standardized work in the station so they can jump in and help. So they know all those 4 jobs very well, and they can write and improve the standardized work. But they do not do any sort of corrective action or discipline of the members. They're not in a managerial role. They're in a support or assist role. And the supervisor of the team leader is the first level of management in North America, and that would be a supervisor. That supervisor at Toyota we call a group leader. That group leader would typically oversee about 4 or 5 team leaders. The ratio is basically the same, very similar. And they would be responsible for about 20 or 25 team members would be a typical scenario, although that varies depending on various factors in different applications. So the supervisor would be the first level of management. that would do performance reviews and that would do any disciplinary type action or managerial action, and whereas the team leader would be sort of leading a small team and performing the roles that I described. Supervisor has a broader set of roles than those four, but pretty similar.
Thanks, Jamie. Somebody asked specifically about absenteeism. Is it the responsibility of the team leader to fill in for absenteeism? Are there other roles in Toyota that
Yes. Yeah. So if
function?
there is, we try to have absenteeism to be very, very low. That comes into people's stability. But there are cases that emergencies come up and somebody can't make it in. And in that case, the team leader will jump in and fulfill a team member's role. And then another team leader will then oversee two teams. So you might have one team leader for a period of time covering 8 team members instead of 4, while there is somebody is missing from the line for various reasons.
Jamie, could you talk a little bit about team leader training and development? There have been a number of questions along those lines in terms of what's involved in preparing somebody to fulfill that function.
Yeah, so I'm gonna talk about that. Inside Toyota, there's all sorts of training that needs to be completed before someone would apply to become a team leader. It's principally around demonstrated problem-solving skills through quality circles and the like. And they need to have good human relation skills that can be practiced and trained. Would be very critical to doing this work. Problem-solving and human relation skills are critical. However, what I'd like to say is outside Toyota, when we introduce this role, what we generally do that we have found quite effective is we will run a pilot in a small area. We will nominate some people to play this role on a pilot basis as an experiment, and we will ask them to fulfill those 4 roles that I listed. And we'll make that very intuitive and practical to their work. And in many cases, these people are former team members. That is very relatable. They say, wow, I wish when I was working as a team member, assembling or building a product, I could have some help that could come to help me along the way when I had problems. And because my supervisor has got so much going on, they can't practically help me in the moment. So we create that position and we coach people to those 4 roles. And as those roles evolve, then we will train people on more intricate skills like problem solving, like standardized work, like how to jump in and to help out to maintain output, and build that role gradually over time through experimentation and trial through a pilot.
Jamie, there's a question here related to sort of where responsibility for team leader development lies. The question was along the lines, in one company, there's not a lot of development for team leaders. In another company that they're familiar with, it's the responsibility of the quality department. In another one, it's HR's responsibility. So could you talk a little bit about, kind of who owns the responsibility, who has ownership for team leader development inside TPS?
The supervisor has the owner of team leader development. It's the supervisor's responsibility.
Their direct leader.
Their direct supervisor, which we call a group leader, is responsible for coaching and developing the team leaders in a similar way that the team leaders have a significant responsibility to coach and develop the team members. Now, that group leader may get help from those support functions like human resources and quality for training material and development and some other type of work that would be done. But the ultimate responsibility to build and develop strong team leaders is on that group leader or the supervisor.
Excellent. Thank you. Here's another question. So a little bit more about maybe the mechanics. When you say that the team leader would do something temporary to fix a problem within the 60-second tack time, as soon as the problem occurs, what do you mean by temporary? Could you please elaborate on that?
Oh, I gave an example of somebody is shooting a screw and the torque gun doesn't achieve the proper torque. So the Jidoka signal goes off, say this bolt didn't get torqued properly for whatever reason. The team leader might come in and make a pre-approved repair by quality to get a bolt in there correctly. And that would be done within 60 seconds, and the car would be defect-free and pass. The next part is, okay, well, why did that torque not happen correctly? Was it a problem with how the bolt was oriented? Was it a problem with the gun? Was it a problem with debris or dirt on the bolt or on the nut, so to speak, if that was screwing? All of those things could be potential causes of why that one screw did not screw in properly. So that would be the example.
Outstanding. Okay, another question related to team leaders' work. So the question is, what percentage of team leaders' work is standardized? For example, with standardized work audits, with use of FMDS, et cetera.
There are some standard routines that they need to do. For example, at the beginning of the shift, there will be a safety check and quality confirmation of things in the stations in some areas that have to be done at the beginning of shift. There'll be some quality checks of the product or the vehicle that need to have, or the vehicle or product, anything we're making at some frequency. Those will be standardized that have to happen at certain hours of the day or within certain hour chunks for quality control and containment. There will be standardized work reviews or audits that have to happen that's standardized in some regular fashion throughout the shift. Those kind of things will be standardized. And then others would be non-standardized, responding to the andon pulls or signals for help.
All right, great. Thanks, Jamie. So there was a question that came in very early on. I don't want to ignore this at all. We're talking about the team leader role in TPS at Toyota. And so much of what you're drawing from, Jamie, I think in both your presentation and in your answers to questions is coming from the shop floor. Toyota is a manufacturing company building cars. So that makes sense. There are certainly, as you can imagine, some people here who don't work in physical operations like car building. And so one of the questions that came in very early on, could you share some good examples of what an andon would look like in knowledge work, such as software development? In particular, what's the difference between a problem and a team member should investigate and resolve on their own? What guidance can be given to people when they shouldn't pull the andon cord?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the principles, I believe, are the same. You have somebody doing knowledge work, and you're running that as a process. There are some decisions that need to be made about the work that they're doing. What of that work is standardized and should happen to a routine, and what is more creative work where the person is making their own decision and judgment. And then also, as that person's doing their work, what in that process, what would we consider a problem that we would want to be investigated quickly while all the evidence is fresh? There's a lot of research that shows that you can uncover the root cause of a problem far more effectively if you start investigating it very close to the time and place of occurrence. So if somebody is working at a computer and they're doing knowledge work, you have to have those parameters defined. And then you think about, okay, well, how frequently might a problem come up that we would want to have investigated? And what skills would that person need and how would we signal that? So that's how I do it. Now, I'll just give you an example. You talk about knowledge work and IT. For myself at Toyota, I'm not a knowledge worker, but I work on my computer a lot to create documents, presentations, videos, and things like that. And we have an IT department that comes to help us solve problems. And there are lots of areas in the IT world that I think these principles can be applied. Computers lock up, Wi-Fi doesn't start working, things happen. And very often when that happens, I'm asked, well, reboot your computer. And I said, well, I don't want to reboot my computer until we know what the cause of the problem is. So let's get all the evidence fresh on my computer. So why did this happen? So we can get to the root cause of it and prevent it from happening again. And so that would be an example of how you might try to do some of that to capture why the evidence is fresh. But my last piece of suggestion to that asking this question is to develop these roles through trial and experimentation, because that world might be quite different, but we have found the same principles apply. And that in knowledge work, and certainly in hospitals, we find that people are used to working around problems. And they happen again and again and again and again. And the idea is to find some of these that we can investigate and prevent from happening again by reoccurrence prevention. And that's what we're trying to design to.
So I'm going to jump to a question asked by Daniel Jones, who's perhaps the Daniel Jones, sort of co-leader, co-founder of the Lean movement, or someone with a very recognizable name in our community. So the comment in question, you mentioned that the team leaders own and update the standardized work. In many organizations, the work instructions are owned by the manufacturing engineers. Can you talk about if team leads are trained to be able to make decisions on how to do the work?
Yeah, so here's how this works in our world and also at many companies. When we have a new vehicle coming out, we're using the vehicle example for what we saw on that cartoon. The engineering department, quality engineers in particular, will have a quality requirement for how each work element is performed. So in that 60 seconds of work that we described in that example, there may be 10 work elements that have to happen. Let's say 10 work elements at 6 seconds each. Grab this screw it at this torque, at this angle, and confirm it. All right, that's that element of 6 seconds of work that needs to happen. Those work elements are defined and standardized by quality engineers and are approved. That says that work element needs to be performed exactly that way in order to ensure the quality of the vehicle. That is done by engineering and is approved, and vehicles are actually tested and certified that those requirements actually work. So we had to adhere to them. But those standards don't say what sequence we should put the bolts in. We can put that bolt in on different stations on the line. If the line speed changes, we can move from station A to station B. And it doesn't say anything about where the screw should be located relative to the vehicle. It says grab the bolt and put it in properly. It doesn't say how to grab it or where to grab it from. So there are standards for the engineering requirements to ensure quality that are through work instruction sheets. The team leaders have the authority to do the work sequence and how people actually perform it. And that's what the team leaders do. Now, they need to have the judgment and with their supervisor to know if they're going to try to do something with how the work is done in work sequence that may impact quality, in which case they have quality engineers assigned to their area that will come in and review and say, okay, we're going to change the sequence of how we do these things and change the order. And the team leader will say, I think this completely complies with our element instructions for how each 6 seconds should be done. But I have a doubt about this or this. Let's talk about that and improve it. So there would be collaboration and teamwork.
Thanks, Jamie. So maybe one final question. It'll be a two-parter, and then we're going to transition back to just a couple of final slides we want to share before we re-engage with Q&A. Thanks for all the questions that are coming in. This is exactly what we had hoped for, so thank you for supplying some good questions. So let's see. So several questions kind of along these lines. I'm going to paraphrase. But there was a question around kind of how team leader performance is monitored and measured. And then I guess a related question around the process for coaching. The word disciplining was using team members that are failing to follow their standard work. So performance of the team leader and then coaching for team members.
The group leader or the supervisor is responsible for coaching, developing, and the performance review of the team leaders. That's how that happens. Supervisor does that. Disciplining team members that are failing to follow their standardized work. So if somebody is, for whatever reason, not following the standardized work, meaning the work sequence or some aspects of that, in all likelihood, the team leader will uncover that first and work with that team member to figure out what is the cause of the problem. Meaning you're not following the work sequence because you're not trained to it, then that's a training problem, and the team leader would do that. Not following it because there is a disruption in the flow, something has happened that's made it difficult to do that, then we want to solve that problem. And there are many cases where the factors come in play that get in the way of being able to do the standardized work the way it is designed, and we have to solve those as problems to solve, as we've talked about. There may be some rare instances where somebody just doesn't want to comply. We try to have the standardized work to be the most smoothest, easiest, intuitive way to do the work as much as possible. But if we get somebody that's, after we try to solve all those other reasonable causes, then that it becomes a coaching and disciplinary process with the supervisor, and they would work that issue. That would be how that happens. But from my experience at Toyota internally and in many, many years outside Toyota, it's pretty rare that you get somebody that's willfully non-compliant. It's usually there's a problem that they can't do it the way it was designed, and that there are plenty of problems to solve, or they're not properly trained. Almost all cases that we can work down that path.
Great. Thanks, Jamie. Okay, I'm going to jump back into our slides. Continue to submit questions. That's fine. We've got a few more queued up to answer, a little bit more information to share. We may address some of them in our remaining time together. Let me go ahead and find my slides again. And Jamie, verbally, could you confirm the slides are up?
Yep.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so Jamie, here's sort of a summary slide that we put together, setting you up for a chance to share some of your observations outside of Toyota with regard to this team leader role we've been focused on today.
Yeah, a few comments that Josh and I thought. This team leader role is pretty rare in North America outside of Toyota when we go to work with new organizations that we're going to work with. The team leader role, the way I've described it with those 4 key roles. In many cases, organizations do not have this 4 to 6 to 1 ratio, which is typically what's required for those 4 roles to happen that I described. Maintain output, standardized work, and training. So that's the first thing. There are organizations that will have a utility type person. They may not fulfilling these 4 roles, or they'll have a larger ratio than 4 to 6. When I've seen that in organizations, I can't think of any time when I've seen that actually been able to perform the roles as we described it, because it's just too much on the plate of the team leader to actually fulfill those 4 roles effectively.
Maybe just a quick comment on that, Jamie. The experience that I kicked off this webinar with, recalling my experience as a quote unquote shift supervisor at Starbucks, would have been a good example, I think, of that utility type position. And in fact, what's sort of interesting is in that coffee shop at that time, my ratio was 1 to 4. Actually, I was the one sort of supervisor supporting three to 4 actually baristas. So in a way, you could argue we had the ratio right, but in that floater role, I was heavily relied upon to simply run and operate the coffee shop. I was not in a position to fulfill those 4 roles that you talked about: maintaining output, solving problems in the work, coaching and training standardized work. So anyway, just a quick sort of comment on that.
And so the second point is, if you don't have the ratio and the skill and other factors, it's impossible or very difficult for people to solve problems one by one as they occur immediately, as we described: pull the cord, arrive, investigate, contain, root cause. People can't do it. There's just too many problems coming at them. And then the other thing I found that without this role working effectively, it's impossible or very difficult to create and sustain standardized work.
Yeah, that's right. So, one of the things that you and I talked about in the lead up to this webinar was the opportunity we thought we have with the team leader role in TPS at Toyota to get at some, in a concrete fashion, get at some of the differences that we see between organizations that are really emulating Toyota with TPS, pursuing that kind of highest level of organizational performance, from others that may be doing really good work, improving continuously in a way, but not achieving that sort of level of performance that we would see with TPS at Toyota. So we might call that an expression of lean. We might call that lean, consistent with that universal definition of lean that we kicked off the webinar with. But to get to that definition of TPS that you articulated, and then to achieve one-by-one problem solving with highly precise standardized work, as you've explained, sort of the argument is that would be virtually impossible to do without team leaders set up in the way that we've described during this webinar. Fair to say, Jamie?
Yeah, let me just say I haven't seen it in my 15 years doing this. And it may be happening somewhere and I haven't been exposed to it. I'm just saying in my work. The hallmark of TPS is using the just-in-time and the Jidoka to solve massive amounts of problems on the front line, one by one, as they occur, very close to the work has been done. Massive amounts of reoccurrence prevention fuels performance and fuels engagement and job satisfaction. That's the essence of it.
That's great. So maybe a little plug here. Jamie, you and I talked about this as well. So maybe 2 months ago or something, LEI published this article that I wrote exploring the question, what are we really teaching in frontline jobs? And sort of the basic premise there is that a vast majority of working adults have as their first kind of working experience jobs in sectors such as retail, food, hospitality, where we almost never see the kind of team leader role that we've been describing today. And as a consequence, those people early in their professional careers are taught about work and management in a very different environment. They're taught about work in a way that makes them understand that, well, chaos is just normal, to be expected, that generally you're on your own. People aren't there to help you. That might encourage them not to ask questions, but to simply suppress things going wrong and kind of figure it out. Survival of the fittest is sort of a term used for that. Or perhaps that, making things better is not your job. It's the job of some faraway abstract fixture of your imagination. Imagine a world where all young people in their first jobs experience an environment with the hallmark of the team leader role that, Jamie, you've described today. How much different that would be in terms of the education that young people receive around what work and management actually entails. So a little plug, perhaps, to check out that article. I thought that was something worth sharing. 2 more plugs. So for many years now, LEI and TSSE have collaborated on what we call the Lean Leadership Learning Tour, where we go visit 3 organizations, including Toyota in Kentucky, GE Appliances, an automotive supplier, Summit Polymer. And in that tour, there's a wonderful opportunity to go see firsthand the team leader role at Toyota and engage in even more in-depth conversation along the lines of what we've been doing here. We have a few openings, just a few, less than a handful of openings for our upcoming tour the week of November 10th. The next one will be sometime in May. You can stay tuned for information about that posted date once it's been finalized. And then finally, every year LEI organizes an annual conference. We call it the Lean Summit. This year, we're trying something new because of how important we feel this team leader role is to the implementation of TPS and just the sustainable success of lean, of any lean enterprise, really. We want to encourage sort of conversation, focus, and the actual participation of real-life team leaders. And so to facilitate that, we're offering essentially a 50% discount to +1 team leaders, +1 or +2 team leaders that are brought by an upper-level manager or director. At the summit, we're doing some special programming for those team leaders. And in fact, Jamie and a colleague of his will join me in Houston, Texas on March 12th and 13th for next year's Lean Summit to talk more about this team leader role. In fact, the colleague that Jamie's going to bring has a wonderful story from starting as a team member, becoming a team leader, and then developing into higher levels of management at the company, all the while leveraging the skills, the fundamental skills that were built in her early in her career when she was preparing to become a team leader, when she was a team leader, so on and so forth. So we're looking forward to that contribution from Jamie, you and your colleague, and the opportunity to celebrate the team leaders that are in many of our lives and our companies and have them participate in this wonderful annual event. Okay, we are at time. There were a couple of other questions that we had queued up. Of course, there were some questions that were submitted that we didn't get to. Thank you all for your questions, for your engagement. Sorry to those that we weren't able to address during our hour together. We will make note of those questions and try to address them in various ways in the coming weeks and months. Thanks again for coming. We're really honored by the hour that you spent with us. And thank you, Jamie, for joining me for this webinar. Sorry, go ahead.
Josh, I was going to say one thing. Do we have another minute?
Say 1 minute or 10 seconds.
One question that came up was about, isn't this added overhead cost to the team leader role? And I was just going to say that this we found is overall a cost improvement and performance improvement and a very good investment. And when we work with companies, we absolutely work in that direction. We wouldn't advise people just to add a whole layer of people. You do it by experimentation in another, make that role work. And usually we can redeploy people from the frontline work by making that work smoother and easier and redeploy some of those resources in this problem solving role. So there's actually no change in labor cost. And sometimes, so just wanted to say that comes up quite a bit, an important thing about implementing this.
Yeah, thank you. Very good catch. Thanks, Jamie. All right. Well, thanks again for joining me for the webinar, Jamie. Thanks to everyone who attended. We will
Thanks, Josh.
see you soon. Bye for now.
Yep. Thank you all.